everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is focusing on the second season community. I've spent some time this past week making some homemade add-ons for the second season football game and wanted to share those with everybody. I'm going to make a post on the Delphi forums about them, but I thought I'd show them on this video so people knew what they could go grab from my Google Drive. However, before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of keeping track of field position and other aspects of tabletop football games, as it's sort of had an interesting history, at least on my tabletop, and I'd like to hear in comments what you folks are using to represent the football field on your tabletop. So to start, I've got a number of games laid out on the table from my collection. It sort of represents my my history of gaming. So over here, first we've got an old setup from the Sports Illustrated college football game, and you'll notice that they had a cool stand-up scoreboard as well as a really neat plastic football field that would track both the first down marker as well as ball position. It still works pretty good, you know, kind of fiddly to get those exact yards, and you'll see that's pretty much a running theme for any of the football fields for any of these games. But it was cool that you had the dials for to track timeouts and the score, the game clock. You can see this one's pretty worn and doesn't stand up all that well anymore. You know, it's not something I use, but it's fun to look back on. So this is from the early 70s. And then the successor to this game, Pay Dirt, or one of the successors to the game, had this really nice football field, cardboard football field, or I'm sorry, mounted map football field with a marker for the first down marker and just, you know, football marker to move around. Again, pretty cool. Can be a little bit fiddly, but I think there's probably a number of people that still use this. And if you're looking for a nice, simple, rugged football field for your games, I definitely recommend go on eBay and look for a copy of Pay Dirt, because you know, this would do you really well, especially when you're playing head-to-head and you want to have some a football field on the table to give more of that immersion factor when you're playing the game. So just make sure you get it with the 10-yard marker that fits the artwork on the field, as well as you can use any old token to represent the football. Then, so I took a break from football games for a number of years and got back into it eventually with Gridiron Wars by Downey Games. And you can see on the Gridiron Wars field kind of a nice thing they did, and I'll have to get in close. You'll notice there are actual, not only the representation of the football field, but actual markers for each specific yard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you could actually move a football along this, or a marker along this football field to track exact field position. So that's a pretty nice innovation. I've seen a number of games use something similar. So while I was playing Downey football, that's when I eventually got turned on to Replay's version of second season, back when Play.com wasn't around for the time being, and Keith gave Pete Ventura the game to carry forward, and Pete did. And this is the board that came with the game. Again, much like what Pay Dirt did, they printed out a nice first and 10, or a down marker, so you could track first downs, and a football marker, much simpler. It's just pretty much the front of that mark is where the ball is going to be spotted. Now again, when you get down into individual yardage, it can be a little bit tough, especially if someone bumps the table and the marker, you know, can get kind of sticky and stick your finger and move around, so you got to be pretty careful with it. So not the most elegant solution, but certainly workable and looks good on your table. And I will be coming back to Replay here in a minute, but that's the Replay version. Now, while I was playing Replay, I was looking around on eBay and in toy stores for other solutions to the football field. You know, I would use this solution for a while, and understand that while I was playing all these games, I wasn't really concerned about keeping stats, keeping detailed play-by-play statistics and totals. So I was pretty much just worried about the clock and the score, which I could keep on a piece of notepaper. And one of the cool fields that I did find was from a game called First and Goal, which is still available. Check it out. Check out this football and marker and watch what happens. It's magnetic. You know, I'm going ahead and moving it around, and there's this nice magnetic strip that runs underneath this game board. And so both the yard markers for the first down, for 1st and 10, and the football are magnetic. So wherever you stick it, it's going to stay in place. Kind of a neat solution. But the problem is this field is so big and takes up so much table space, compared to the other solutions. Plus, there's just a lot of artwork that's specific to the actual game itself. I tried it for a little bit. I actually tried making my own with magnetic paper and things like that, but I was never really happy with any of my solutions. So, I thought I'd show it. Other people viewing this may find this is something that they could find useful. You could always, tape over or use sticky paper and put, say, second season information over this part of the board, for example, and that might be a neat homebrewed solution for a second season field. And then finally, after I had been immersed in the hobby and understood that Play.com was back, I went ahead and got into second season from Play.com. Now you'll notice that this is the new box version, so that's another point of this video, to show the new second season box, which is awesome, much nicer than the old box. And in this game today, you will get one of these fields, kind of a similar process to the Replay published version, where you have a printed field and some simple markers to track ball position and yard to gain. Something that I'm not terribly enamored with. So while I was looking through this second season box this weekend, it reminded me of a method that Steve Tower was using when we played head-to-head in person in Milwaukee earlier this year. And it was a different version of the second season, a different version of the second season game board. And here it is. So I also found this in my replay box. I honestly didn't remember it. But it's this kind of approach where you have numbers representing the yard lines, and you just simply move a pawn as ball position changes back and forth. And you can use one pawn to mark the line of scrimmage where the ball is, and another marker for the yard to gain. And it works really nice. The problem is it does have a version of the game clock, the advanced game clock from Replay, that I don't use. I use the more simpler game clock measurements that Keith publishes now in his game, as well as just the solitaire defense settings. It doesn't include the new offensive settings that are now included on Keith's board. So, what to do? Well, I jumped into InDesign on my Mac, and I came up with my own homebrewed solution. And here it is. So what I did was I came up with a football field design, much like the Replay design, where I have simple yard markers or a simple spot to track the ball position and yard to gain with a pawn, as well as a complete outline of the defensive settings, offensive settings, and audible settings for the solitaire play calls that are identical to, just laid out a little bit differently than these that you will find on the official play board. So everything that's located here is on the top of this sheet, and instead of the original printed field, you now have this field to move the pawns on to show ball position, and finally the position to use a pawn to track game clock information. And then finally, I use the extra space for first through fourth down markers if you're using that as well. Again, getting that idea from Keith's game board. So I will put a link down below in the show notes to this board. I recommend printing it out on cardstock. This is on probably a 60 weight. I'm probably going to reprint it, I think, on a little bit heavier weight since I'm pretty happy with it and may end up using it at some point in the future. But that is not the way I'm actually playing the game right now. I printed this out because I know there are some, or I created this because I know there's a lot of people who like to play the game with this kind of board, Steve Tower being one. So I hope this is helpful to you, Steve. But here's the main information now for this video. Okay, so keeping score or keeping statistics and a track of what's going on in the game has gotten a lot of conversation on the Delphi forums. What you're looking at right now is the original score sheet that came with Replay when it was published by Replay Games, not Keith. And I did draw some inspiration from this for the custom score sheet that I'm about to show you. Besides the information at the top for the teams, there are penalty and fumble ratings. You have the timeouts, you have the game clock, a special game clock section for less than 2 minutes in each half, first downs, passer statistics, rushing statistics, receiving statistics, and then a bunch of extra space for fumbles lost, and other stats, defensive stats, etc. The problem I have with this kind of score sheet is I never really had a good way of keeping track of the game when I'd get up and move, when I'd have to stop the game. You know, you've got a busy life. It's hard to get in a full game of second season in one sitting. So this wasn't very good for leaving it for hours or days at a time and then coming back to it. So as folks know, what I did was I devised a playlog score sheet that a number of folks are using, but I'll get to that in a second. So that's the Replay version that was kind of inspiration for what you're going to see. This is what comes in the game right now when you buy second season football. A box to track time in, first downs and penalties, passer information, rushing information, receiving information, as well as the actual scoreboard down at the bottom, and the same spaces for miscellaneous information that the other sheet had as well. Now, as many folks know, I have not been using any format like this because, to be honest with you, and as I said on the forums, when I developed this playlog that you're looking at now, I was really only interested in keeping track of things like who had the ball, down, distance, line of scrimmage, and then I would track the play, run, pass, or kick, the key player, yards gained or lost, and any notes such as scores, penalties, etc. And I had this little field up here, really nothing more than a tool for me to use to count yards forward and backwards. On kickoffs, punts, when you have to be doing the math across the 50-yard line. And I also had the information for the game clock for how to do timing, and then of course the boxes to check off as you get through the game. Now, this is great. You just print it out two-sided and you get a whole game in one sheet of paper. And then Steve Tower came along and said, hey Al, I think you can tighten this up, get us more lines, because the problem is sometimes you would run out of lines on the log. So we have version 2, which is available on my Google Drive, which has pretty much all the same information, all the same fields, except I tightened it up a bit. And now you get about 6 more plays per quarter out of it. So for folks that like this format, it's still 2 pages. I suggest printing it out double-sided if you can, and you get the whole game on one sheet. Now, when I was in Milwaukee playing the game, for some reason I caught the bug of wanting to keep more detailed game stats. How's the quarterback doing? How are the rushers doing? Etc. And I also kind of caught the bug of calling manual key rushers and receivers rather than always using the Finder charts. So I got to work and I came up with a new format for myself, which I think may serve me well moving forward. So let's take a look. So what you've got is along the top on the scoreboard, a box to track offense or defensive tendencies, the scoreboard, timeout tracker, first down tracker, and penalty totals. Then you have a new version of the game clock, which is going to be 1 stroke for each 15 seconds. And so when you put 2 strokes in a box, basically make an X, that's a full 30 seconds. And there's instructions printed on the sheet on this version for actually how to work the clock. Then you have on both the left and the right areas to track quarterback, quarterback performance, rushing performances, and receiving performances. What's cool about the quarterback performances, now you have tick box for every 5 attempts or completions. You'll have a tick box to check off. Makes it a lot easier to visually see how things are going. You also have trackers for touchdowns thrown, interceptions thrown, and sacks taken, as well as, thanks to Steve Tower, helpful boxes to track the number of times you've called a bootleg, sneak, or trick play, which are limited, 1 per half for the bootleg and sneak, and 1 per game for the trick play. And some help text down here for some of the more common rules from second season football for the advanced notations. Now you have that for both sides with different rules being tracked over here. And for rushers and receivers, again, more rules being explained down below. But what's cool is you have boxes now for attempts and yards for both rushers and receivers, so you can not only track the number of rushes, but when you write the value in there, that's tracking the totals, and a box to tally the totals at the end of the game. But what I'm most proud of is now we have a drive summary at the bottom. Now this is a simple version of the score sheet. Because it has so much help text, I wasn't able to get more boxes onto this form, but just 1 second, there is an alternate version of this. But this is pretty nice. It allows you to keep track of just the results of each drive for both the visiting and home team, with a little note there to note, did this team receive the opening kickoff? That way you know if you do leave the game and you start the second half, who receives the second half kickoff. You won't forget that. But the idea here is to track things like punt or touchdown or rushing touchdown, 24-yard rushing TD by. It's just a way to put the summary of the drive into one box. So I hope people enjoy this score sheet. This is more for people newer to the game because it does have all this informational text all throughout the form as a little reference guide while you play. Now, for those who are more familiar with the game and are coming from replay and like are coming from the replay version and still use the fumble and penalty optional charts that are available on the freebies page, I now have a second version that tracks that information. So you can have those ratings added to the sheet so you can track those as well. The only difference now is when you go to the bottom, and I'll have another sheet like this too, what I've added for each drive summary, I was able to tighten up the form so each drive summary now has a kick return or punt return section so you can track special teams. Special teams yard totals can now be determined by adding the values from those fields. So not only do you get a drive summary, but you get to see the punt return or kick return that began the drive as well. And also, because we had to make room for penalty and fumble ratings, penalties got bumped off this top row, but now penalties can be tracked right here underneath the quarterback section. All right, now here's the third version. This is the version without the optional penalty and fumble ratings, but adds the drive summary information at the bottom. So this is, since I'm not using the optional penalty and fumble charts, this is probably the version that I will be using the most. Now you'll notice there is no help text, but every now and then you do want to get a reminder of what a symbol means or some special rules in the NFL. So to accompany this form, I created a quick reference sheet, which I went ahead and gave some nice play.com look to it, but it has usage grade information, miscellaneous rules, and then all of the advanced ratings explained, and finally at the bottom some pro football rules for kickoff spots, spot after missed field goal, 2-point conversion, instant replay and overtime, and timing of out of bounds plays. So you'll find this on my Google Docs page as well. Finally, I did come up with an innovation that I haven't had time to test out yet, but it's sort of a hybrid of both the playlog that everybody seems to like, as well as this new score sheet that I've been showing tonight. And that's a supplementary playlog form that you would actually use along with the score sheet and just slide it right underneath the page. So that way you can do both things. You can track who has the ball, down distance, and line of scrimmage very quickly and easily, while also at the same time keeping full stats on the game. So you simply keep track of the actual play-by-play on this form down the left-hand side while you're filling in information over here in the score sheet, and just move the sheet over one more column once you fill up the first column, and do the same thing again. And then a third column of plays should be enough for most games. And so I have 3 columns of that information to go along with the score sheet. And finally, since I did have some extra space left over, I went ahead and added a column for visitor penalties and home penalties, since on the score sheet itself, all you're really tracking are penalty totals, and you don't really get the details of what penalties were called. So I thought it would be interesting just to go ahead and, since I had the room, add that to this form. So this will be available on my Google Docs site as well. Okay, that is it. I know I just covered a lot of stuff, and I'm hoping the folks that play second season are interested in seeing what I put together. I hope folks get use out of these new score sheets. I'll put the links down below in the video for how you go ahead and download them. And that's it. So until next time, go play some second season, have fun, and I will talk to you guys later.